All right, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about working with product shots, and I'm going to be working with a tape machine product by Akai. As you guys know, I'm into music. I like making beats. I have right here in front of me a MPC 2000 XL. I got a SP 404 Mark II. I got a SP 404A, SP 4 SP 303. So yeah, we're gonna talk about tape machines and creating a product shot out of it. I'm gonna run you guys through Pinterest and walk you through some references, and then also go into using Natron, which is a compositor that looks a lot like Nuke. Great open source program if you guys have not checked it out yet for compositing. I'm going to talk a little bit about Photoshop, but I'm not going to really get into it. And then also, of course, our centerpiece, Blender, and how I approach lighting based off the references that I pull from Pinterest. So let's get into it. Let's talk about it and get you guys through this walkthrough. All right, so let's talk about it. Um, so today I got this tape machine, and I just want to walk you guys through this tape machine product. Obviously, we're doing a product shot here, and I'm doing one of these more modern product shots today where, it's in an empty void, it's floating, has some very dynamic lighting, really great shadows in the shots to create the shapes. Um, so let me just walk you guys through what the tape machine is, and then we'll get into the 3D part. So let's switch over just to give some call outs of where I got the tape machine and what I did. So let's switch over to the website. So I downloaded this tape machine from 3D Sky. Very great model. Originally, it came in 3D Studio Max and V-Ray. Obviously, I've said in the past that I am a 3D Studio Max slash V-Ray user for a long time. So it was fairly easy for me to just take this in and prep it for Blender. So I had to get it ready, export it out as an FBX, and then from there I brought it into Blender, and then I had to do a lot of reconnecting of textures. Now there may be some textures that are missing. However, I just wanted to do some lighting practice on this shot because I was just working on a product shot. So I am going to go back in and add the digital numbers. And as I can see, the tape spool itself has a texture on it that I'm noticing now it's missing in my shot. So that'll be great to add back in. And then we're using the dark version of the tape machine. So there's also a light version that came, and then there's a dark version. So I used the dark version. So it's like a black metallic metal. So now let me switch over to here. So these are some of my inspirations. So you guys may have seen a lot of these types of shots on Pinterest, elsewhere. They're highly dynamic shots. I really recognize this shot. This is Man versus Machine right here, if you guys are familiar with that company. But yeah, so these are the types of shots that I'm inspired by for what I wanted to create. So I wanted to create a shot with the tape machine. I'm really into doing music production myself. I like making beats. I have a MPC 2000 XL, and then there's also a collective that I'm part of, and there's a guy named by the name of Stolen Drums. If you guys have not checked him out, and we talk, our whole group, we always talk about a lot of equipment, and one of the big things is tape machines, because tape machines is a thing that's used to give a lot of texture to your music these days, being that a lot of music is made on the computer. All right, so this is some of my inspiration, highly dynamic lighting. I'm also going to walk you guys through my process of using post production in Natron again. But let's switch back over to our 3D scene. So in setting up my 3D scene, I was highly organized in this shot, in creating this shot, or this scene, I should say, in this Blender file. So in the Blender file, I set up an assets scene here by default. and I wanted to lay out all my assets. And if I'm going to work on this project some more, which I probably will, I can always come in, add new assets. So this is my base scene to grab out any kind of things out of my toolbox to create a shot. So first off, I have my background. So this is my background collection. And then I have my tape machine here. So this is my tape machine, and I have inside the tape machine model or the collection, I have two area lights lighting up the VU meter. So this is just lighting up my VU meters here, because usually in old equipment, you'll have like a little light lighting everything up. So that's the two lights that I have there. And then this model itself, just to be even more organized, it's being linked into my file. So I cannot make any edits to this model. I would have to go to the file that's linked, which is somewhere on my external hard drive. Okay. So that's the tape machine. And then I also have another model, which is a floor model. And I'll probably create a lot more. And I want to add some other assets. So this model here is actually is a displacement map. So as you can see, if you look at the profile, it's displaced. So I actually downloaded this from Megascans as a texture. And so I just wanted to use something more textured. So I can actually create this floor, and I can do some other tricks with the floors too to create, like, maybe I wanted to create some a wet texture to this floor. So I could add another plane and just kind of lower it into intersect with the rocks here. So now I can easily create a wet plane like this. Now I can add a material, say new, and then make it reflective. Let's just turn this to black to make it just highly reflective. So now we got like a wet material. You see that? Easily created just by the fact that our terrain is a displacement map, and then I can add a flat plane on top of that. So it's like now we have this wet surface that I can put this tape machine on for another shot. Okay. So I haven't used it yet. I do plan on creating another shot with this floor material eventually. So I'm going to actually drop this in because this is actually looking pretty cool. I'm going to keep that. All right. So now those are my elements. Again, this is my background. I use this for the different shots, and we'll go to shot 100. And so this is one of the final shots that I created. This is the only final shot. I do have another shot here. This is a work in progress, and I think I am using that floor. Yeah, so this is another work in progress. It's not done. It's still a work in progress. So I'm going to come back to this one later. But this is a final shot. Okay. So it was pretty simple to set up. I brought the assets in via pressing Shift A, collection instance, and then I can bring those assets into my shot that I have. So I can go down here to tape machine and then bring it in, and then I'll have it in my shot. So it's all being referenced. So this is purely for composition setup only. So now all I did was brought it in, came in straight on, and then I just started playing with the rotation of the tape machine as I brought it in. So I liked the fact that I had it leaning back. So originally it was standing straight up, and then I lean it back a little bit so that we can just get under it a little bit, because the face of this is sitting down right now. So I wanted to lean the tape machine back a little bit so that we're not just getting this straight on. Very, I think boring is a lack of a better term, but we'll use boring. So it just feels kind of boring just with a very straight shot. So I wanted to create a little bit of getting three sides of this square. So we got our left, bottom, and front. Okay. And then my camera, talking about the camera, I have, again, I'm always using a 135, and then the depth of field is set to 8. So I wanted to keep everything pretty sharp in this shot. I didn't want to do something like other shots I've done in the past where I have like a 1.4. And so now we're seeing this foreground area to get blurry, and then this top of the tape machine blurry. So I wanted to get everything in focus. So I set it to 8. And then again, have a focus point, right? So I have it right at the face of the tape machine spool. and that's my focus point. So now let's talk about the light. So this is the most important part. So once I was done getting the position of my camera and then the rotation and then also setting my background plane, which I didn't talk about. So I took the background plane and I just rotated it because I wanted the gradient to come diagonally through the shot versus top to bottom. So now it's coming from the top right to the bottom left. So let's talk about the lights. So I'll just walk you through the lights first. We'll turn them all off. Okay. So there's the two lights here that we have referenced from the assets file because I don't need to mess with those at all. So I just want these always on so we can see inside the VU meters. So the first light that I added originally was this light. Okay. This was the key light. However, as I started going through the shot, it was too much for me. And going back to my references, if we go back to looking at these references, we can see a lot of light zones. So like this shot of the shoe here, right? Part of the shoe is lit, but the left and the front of the shoe is not lit. So I wanted to do something more like that. So I created a different key light in my shot. So let's switch back. So I created another key light after I had lit the shot, and I ended up with, let's see which one is it. I ended up with this key light. So I really like the look of this, right? We're getting a piece of just the tape machine, right? Where it's coming in this triangular shape, and I'm really loving that, right? So being that this is a very, very reflective surface, it can be hard to light black objects that are reflective sometimes. Very, very tough. So what you have to work with is the surface reflecting your light, so that when you're working with dark surfaces that are reflective, you have to pay attention. So now you have to pay attention, instead of light flooding onto the object, you got to pay attention how the reflections are capturing the light instead. So now we have to pay attention to light texture and how it's the object is capturing those reflections. So that's how I work through the shot. So being that this left side is wood, I added a fill light on the left, and I wanted to add some color. So originally this light was white, and I played with the color temperature. So we go back to up to 6500. This is what I initially had, but I wanted to make the shot more dynamic. And so I ended up with adding some color temperature, and I took it down to 2500. And then being that I'm using a add-on called Light Wrangler, which it makes it very easy to light things, I get options for HDRI. So I came in here, and so again, talking about light texture, I added an HDRI so that I get a little bit of gradient on my light, so we can see how it's a little bit more solid here and the light starts to fall off on the surface. So that was a really nice look for me. So let's go on to the next light. So now we have two lights. We got the key light. I got a fill. That's a very warm light. And then my next light here, I'm lighting the bottom of this surface. So if we turn it back off, let's go here. Sorry. The bottom of the surface is being lit now, right? So again, we're looking at three sides. We got the left, bottom, and front of this object. So I wanted to highlight that to just break it up. And the next light we have is our kicker light. I call it like a kicker light. So so we have this key light, and then now I need a kicker light to fill the rest of the surface. So now we're getting some light here. We could tell that there's still this triangle shape coming through, but now I'm filling in this surface. I'm filling in some areas here, and let's turn on another light. So we'll turn on this point light. So now this point light, so we got this surface here on the bottom, right? So we got this shape here, this triangular shape, and I wanted to give a highlight here. And so for this one, I used a point light. And so a point light is just like a light that lights in all directions. It's like, you could think of it as like a light bulb, and I'll show you over here in this scene. So this is my point light, right? So it's lighting in all directions, so I can move it around. You can see how the reflection's moving around on that surface. So I can move it in all directions, and it's just highlighting this area, and we're getting a little bit of highlights on the tape reel spool. So there's a second point light. that's also highlighting this area. So this area is pretty dark. And so I just wanted to fill this area in with another light. So let's turn it on. So now this area is getting filled in with a little bit of light too. And again, it's just picking up the reflection of that light. It's not necessarily pure light that's hitting this surface, because being that this is very metallic and reflective, we're picking up a lot of the reflections of the light. So I can move it around. You guys can see how it's falling onto the surface, right? And I hit escape to put it back in its position. And so the reason this plane did not do anything is because this spot is what's working with this plane. So if I turn on the spotlight, we're not going to see anything. But as soon as I turn on the plane, now we're getting something. So what I did was I added a kicker on this surface just to make it a little bit stronger, and also get some hit of light on the tape reel mechanisms, so that they just get a little bit of highlight and rim. So as you can see, as I turn it off and on, you can see that it's getting some highlights pick up. And what I'm doing here is I have a plane sitting to the left of this camera shot, and then the spotlight, I have it hitting from bottom to top. So it's washing across this surface, and then it's bouncing onto the tape machine. And again, I'm matching the warmness of the fill light that I have on this surface also. So I added some color temperature via my shader editor. That's how I added it. So if I remember right, let's go over here. We'll go to my shader editor. And can I select the light? No. Okay. This is what I did. I know what I did now. Apologize. So this surface here has the color. So I gave this surface a black body, and I set the color temperature to 2500 so that it's a colored surface, so that when the light hits it, it's bouncing off that color onto the tape machine. So that's what we did, because for this spotlight, I could not get that color temperature in it. So this was my solution. Instead of doing it on the light, is that I put it on the surface. Okay. All right. So that's all the lights. I wanted to walk you guys through how I set up the shot, how I lit it, my cameras. And now we're going to move over into Natron. So in talking about my render settings, they're pretty straightforward. I actually set this shot up double the size. So it's, I believe 3840 is the number. When you multiply this number times 2, 1920 by times 2 is 3840. So I just rendered one shot. It's not an animation, it's just a static shot. I rendered one shot, saved it out as an EXR. As I've explained in the past, I have a template file that I always use. So by default, my file always opens with everything set. So I never have to worry about it. So everything's set. All my rendered passes are set. I render a multi-pass EXR set to let's go DWAA lossy. All the render passes are in one file, and I proceed to render it. And so my render settings were 4096. I know it's pretty high. However, it's just a still image. I'm not rendering an animation. So I figured I get as much samples as I can into the shot, render it out. I also have my denoiser on using open image. And that's pretty much it. So I set it to render. And so now we'll switch over to Natron, and I'll walk you guys through that. So let's go to Natron. Let's go here. All right. So coming into Natron, I've briefly explained that I also have a template file for compositing. So I have a predefined file where all my render passes are already set up so that I don't have to build all of these elements from scratch, right? You shouldn't have to worry about stuff like this. You should set up a system that's ready for you so that you can just focus purely on the creative and not waste a lot of time rebuilding these elements every single time. I would say, yes, it can be good practice, but if you just want to be able to like jump into things and create these shots, well, templates help a lot. And so I would say, like, if you were to ask me how long it took me to build this, the most the part that took the most time was setting up my textures, right? Converting it from 3D Studio Max, bringing it into Blender and all that stuff, and reconnecting all the textures was the longest part. But building the shot itself, oh, it probably took just like an hour, right? So getting the assets in, and then setting up the shot, right? And then the lighting part is probably the longest part, but everything probably took like 1 hour messing around, maybe a little bit more than an hour, but just take an hour. And then I was rendering, and then now I'm in compositing, and then now I got some other ideas in the compositing phase. So as you saw in Blender, right, it came in as a gray background, and then now at the end result, we have a version where I changed the background, right? So what I did was I'll walk you guys through some of these render passes. So these are the render passes. We got diffuse, we have diffuse direct, we have diffuse indirect. And what I do is I take these render passes and I bring them together. So now we got lighting, and then I combine that with the diffuse, and then we can go here. So now we got some glossiness, glossy color, which is how much reflection each object will have. So that's what this render pass does. This is a raw reflection. Bring them together, multiply them. So now it's controlling the amount of reflection on each thing. So now we can combine that with our lighting, diffuse, and now we're gonna put reflection. So now we're getting that. Let's see if we get anything in these render passes. So I think we should get some showing the VU meter. Nope, not this one. Okay, so this has no information in it. And then we got self illumination, which is my background. I've explained how I do backgrounds before. There's plenty of ways you can approach it. So this one is a emissive material that's sitting way back so it does not affect the object. And it's a gradient. So it's a self illuminated. And so what I did here to change my background color, to keep it simple, I don't even need to use any kind of alpha mask to cut it out, is, since this is all black, is I brought in a constant, right? A colored background as a constant, and I multiplied it on top of my self illumination pass to get the color. And then from there, I added a little bit of glow. So there's some glow flowing right over the edges of my product, right? The tape machine. And then I put it together. So now we add it on top. And then now I'm moving into my color spaces. And so in Blender, I'm using the AGX color space. So by default, Blender 4.1 will use the color AGX space by default. What you can do in Natron is you can load in Blender's color profiles. So if you go to your C program files, Blender 4.1, data files, and there's a folder called color management, and there's what you call a config.ocio, you can load in the same color profiles by using this OCIO color space node. And so from there, it'll give you these options. And so now I got my AGX back. So now I'm using that AGX color space right here in Natron, as I did in Blender, right? And from here, I did not use this node. This is a node to add some other color profiles, but I'm going to turn that off. So now I move from here. I do a little bit of grading. I brighten up the shot, add some contrast, made it more dynamic in terms of my midtones, shadows, and highlights, and then sharpened it, and I was done. And from there, I wrote my file, which is how you export a JPEG, PNG, or whatever file format you want. And that was the done image. So if I go full screen, this is what the final image looked like in, the thumbnail that you've seen in for the YouTube thumbnail. And so what I did for the YouTube thumbnail, I'm not going to walk through it, was I brought it into Photoshop, and then I cut the frame of the shot was 1920 by 1080. So I divided the frame into 3 spots, into 3 columns, and then I just added mask and I just resized each column, each image inside those columns to create my thumbnail, basically. And that was it.